thanks everyone for joining my talk for today. My name is James Taylor. I'm from Comcast. I'm going to be talking about our partnership with Pivotal and the project that we deployed using Cloud Foundry. So a little bit of the agenda, what I want to go through is I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, I'll give you a little introduction about myself. Second, I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of leadership. Third, I'm going to talk a little bit about time and the importance and value of time. Fourth is motivation in terms of what motivates us. Value, and then partnership, and then about our platform, and then a little bit of Comcast, okay? So a little bit about myself. So my background is in finance, operations, and technology. So I somewhat think three-dimensionally, right? I gave myself a title of solution engineer. I'm not really that. I don't know really what I am, but I just try and solve problems, and half the time I cause problems doing it. But so solution engineer, I picked that. On my tagline, it actually says employee, customer, owner. Because when I work at a company, I try and think of it as though it's my company and how would I do things and what are the value propositions that I care about and so forth, right? Giving back. A lot about what's important to me, and the reason I'm giving this is just so you have context to what I'm talking about and the meaning behind it. But giving back to me is extremely important, and it really started when I was in high school and I was doing some volunteer with some kids with cerebral palsy and autism. And it was just always amazing to me how, given their circumstances, they always had a smile on their face, right? And that's stuck with me throughout life, is to realize that, you know, helping someone else have a smile on their face is one of the greatest gifts that we could give each other. And so that's been something that's very dear to me, not only personally, but within our organization as well, in terms of just trying to help and contribute to our teams and our colleagues, right? Passion. I'm very passionate about everything I do, you know, and my colleagues here can attest to it, you know, but I'm very passionate. And again, but at the end of the day, I care, right? So I'm passionate, but I care. So that's what's important to me. So some of the things that I'm working on at Comcast, and I'm going to talk towards the end about the importance and the value that you guys should probably come and work with us at Comcast, because you get to do a lot of cool things. And so to show you that you get to do a lot of cool things, I'm showing you the things that I work on. So I'm working on things around server architecture with respects to high performance computing and looking at FPGAs and symmetrical threading processors and logic gates and things of that nature. I like that stuff because all of those things play a role into application performance, you know? So it's not just a constraint of your application, but the server hardware as well plays a role in your architecture. So I care about those things. Database as a service, working with coming up with ways for us to deliver NoSQL solutions to our teams and so forth. Big data architecture, looking at how we manage the platform and so forth. Cybersecurity, I do pilots with respects to static scan analyzers and things of that nature, looking at different encryption algorithms for our application tool set. Advocate for change, you know, disruptor, like I said. I'm always trying to find value and help our organization drive towards value. Generating patents, that's really big at Comcast. So if you're someone who likes to create new ideas and create solutions and try and get them patentable, Comcast, we have a whole process around that, and it's a lot of fun. And you get paid money too, you know, as your patent progresses through the approval cycle and so forth. So we're big on that. Mentoring of engineers. I'm not sure how I got to be asked to be a mentor, but I'm mentoring this guy. I hope it doesn't leave any lingering, you know, damage to him mentally. But I'm a mentor, you know. New Technology Center of Excellence is an initiative I lead at Comcast, where we try and focus on driving adoption of new technology and doing evaluations, prototyping, you know, and so forth. So that's a little bit about me. So that should give you some context, so as I'm talking, to get a sense of the meaning behind, you know, the words and so forth I'm using. Leadership. So I want to start out with leadership, and I'm just going to be on this for a quick second. No matter what you're doing from a project perspective, a technology perspective, leadership plays a very important role. And we're fortunate at Comcast that our leadership basically tells us, hey, we're going to give you parameters, but you guys go out there and solve the problems. So Pivotal comes in as a part of that notion that we are allowed to solve problems, right? We are free to solve problems. We're giving guardrails. So Scott Alcott, our CIO, he basically focused on creating and providing that credibility to our IT organization. In our group, he helps gives us direction, priority, and focus around this thing called NPS, Net Promoter Score. So that's a big thing for us as an organization, right? So he focuses on that. But then my VP, who I work for, kind of directly, he provides us focus and that overall feedback loop, right? About whether or not we're on the right track and we're doing things that we should be trying to do. And the key things that we're focused on right now is driving down our technical debt, right? And driving down incidents and improving our MTTR, increasing velocity, right? In our organizations, we've got to be able to deliver more because IT budgets don't usually increase, right? They usually, stay the same or go down, if anything. So velocity and ability to do more with what we have is important. And experimentation, okay? So experimentation is also very important at Comcast. And that's about giving development teams the freedom to have time to try new things. You can't move forward, innovate, if you don't have time to try new things. Time. To me, this is like, at the end of the day, we should all really stop and think about what's really important. What are we really trying to get at, right? What we're really talking about today, right? A lot, whether it's with Pivotal or the Spring products, a lot of what we're talking about is time, right? Time is precious for us. Everyone in here has got a clock that's ticking down, right? And every organization has a clock that's ticking to profitability. So time is extremely important because it helps us to kind of put in perspective value. And we need time to learn, right? We also need things such as repeatable processes because repeatable processes help us optimize time, right? It means that we can do it the right way, the same time over and over. If we deviate and we have a problem, we're wasting more time. So time is that commodity that we have to figure out how do we optimize, right? Speed, right? We want to do more with a given amount of time that we have. And again, this ties back to the Pivotal platform and the Spring products, right? The Spring products and Pivotal Cloud Foundry is all about time, right? We talk about it in different abstractions, but when it comes down to it, it's all about time. So I was working through some things and I was trying to get a sense of what are some ways I could try and articulate the value of what we're doing with Spring and Cloud Foundry. And I found, stumbled across the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a psychology principle about the motivation of human beings. What motivates us, right? So at the lowest level and I'm going to talk a little bit about it from a human perspective, the actual Maslow perspective, and then kind of my version of this in a technical perspective. But typically, as a person, your physiological needs are at the lowest level. That's your shelter, food, water, and all those different things. If you don't have those taken care of, the assumption is that you can aspire to higher levels. So as software engineers, our physiological or physical layer for us is the infrastructure. If there's no infrastructure, what can we do? There's no motivation to build anything. There's nothing to run it on. There's nothing to deploy it on. So for us, having that physical infrastructure, right, i.e. that as environment, that's important to us. So for us, we want a resilient infrastructure is our physical layer. The second layer in the human side is security and safety. Well, on the engineering side, we also want security, right? We want to know that if we deploy our applications to this environment, right, that environment is going to be secure. Hence another reason why I showed you earlier, I focus on security, Because if you could have stable infrastructure, but if it's not secure, you're constantly getting hacked, who's going to deploy their application there, right? So the third level is, from a human perspective, is the social aspect. You know, the need to be part of a group, belonging and so forth, right? Having relationships. That's the third part of Maslow's hierarchy needs for humans. But as software engineers, our social piece is DevOps, right? The need to collaborate, right? The need to collaborate with our systems people, with our monitoring, our backup teams, all these other guys that work to help support the ecosystem, right? So that's important to us. And again, we're not going to focus on collaborating if we're not secure, right? Who has time to think about, talking with our dev or our ops folks and everything if you're not secure? What's the point, right? So that's our third part. Ego and esteem and Maslow's hierarchy needs, that's where it talks about our need to be recognized for our accomplishments, things we've done, right? Well, as a software engineer, designing quality software is how we get recognized, right, for what we do. And that sense of, wow, I created something today, right? Every day I want to create something of quality, of value, right? And so again, what do we use to be able to create that quality software? Spring, right? All the components are related to Spring, that whole core Java foundation. We can build anything and everything we want using the Spring framework. So that's our tool set to be able to deliver quality software, to design quality software, right? Now, self-fulfillment. That's when you get to that whole point in life where you're like saying, hey, I'm content, right? I'm there, I've accomplished something, right? I've had this major achievement. That's what it is. It's like self-fulfillment on the human side. On the engineer side, that could be translated into, I've created something, right? I've truly created something new. So what gives you the capability to do that? What platform, what environment will give you that ability to keep trying and keep testing and proving something out and prototyping and trying until you eventually, through repeated efforts and failing and succeeding and failing, you eventually create something of your own. Well, what gives you that capability? That's where PCF comes in. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure. You don't have to worry about, is it secure? You have a DevOps group that you can interact with. You have the Spring framework to build quality software. Now you have an ecosystem environment that's going to allow you to actually create something. And so when you talk about your organization and adding value to your organization, your real competitive differentiation comes from your ability to create something, right? If you can create something and generate value from that, that's your differentiator. So that was my kind of take on the software engineer hierarchy of needs. And so therefore, when we are doing things at Comcast, we try to think a little bit in this way. I try to, dare I say, mentor this engineer, to think this way. Again, you're going to hear me talk a lot about value, because at the end of the day, value is what puts money in everybody's pocket. If our company, Comcast, can't create something of value, no one's going to pay for us. No one's going to give our organization any money if we can't create value. So it's important for us to understand, how do you go about creating value? How do you create a culture and an organization that's value-centric? Part of that is understanding how to solve problems, having different ways to approach problem solving. So if you've got an ecosystem, an environment where you're in a culture where your employees are focused on trying to understand how to solve problems, you're likely to generate value and solutions and products much more rapidly. So some of the things that I like to focus on and think about when you're trying to solve problems, right, is the scientific method, right? We all know the scientific method as an approach to learning, right? It's kind of quasi problem solving, but mainly you're learning because you're hypothesizing about why something is. And then you try and go out and prove it, right? And then there's engineering design processes. Well, that's where you're trying to design solutions to problems, right? And third is systems thinking. So systems thinking is this way of thinking about things in a much more holistic way. It's more like a continuous loop process, okay? So that's kind of system thinking. So these are all approaches that I try to use when I'm trying to solve problems. This is when you hear the concept of, oh, you should try to attack the problem from different angles. That's what it means to attack it from different angles. You're using different ways of thinking, different frameworks of thinking to try to analyze and look at the problem and come up with a solution. Closed loop management systems. So you've heard people talk before about that feedback, right? Well, that's what closed loop management systems is all about. It's about saying, here's a strategy or an initiative and a goal. Here's converting that strategy into an operational plan. Here's operationalizing it. Then from operationalizing that plan and that strategy is execution. And then from the execution, you come up to feedback. And then feedback goes back into the plan because you changed the assumptions that you thought you were operating under. And he says, well, I thought we actually had the capacity to do X. Well, based on the feedback that's coming back to us, we don't have the capacity to do X. Okay, well, let's change that plan, right? And continue to do that. That is a reiterative process. Executives, when they come up with strategic plans, do they come down to us and say, hey, can we ship 1 million units of that X1 box today? No. They kind of assume that we can do certain things based on information they've gathered and so forth. But how things operationally work when you execute is different between headcount, right? You can have headcount and process, but until it's executed, you don't know the efficiency, you don't know what types of drags that are being brought on your process, right? So closed loop management system. Business process management, right, is extremely important because every organization, if you peel the roof off, what you see is a bunch of people executing a bunch of processes. And sometimes, you know, we have this kind of, oh, process, another process, another process. Processes save lives, okay? We depend on processes. Everything we are is a system. Right? Our whole body is nothing but a collection of systems that work together. And hopefully they work together well and we can, you know, enjoy our lives. So processes are not a bad thing. Bad processes are a bad thing, right? And then Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Understanding human behavior, understanding human needs, understanding what makes people, what motivates people. That's extremely important, right? So again, from a developer perspective, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to do anything other than CF push. If I've got to do more than that, that's a problem. I want to know why. So we do have this kind of, you know, in our industry, we have, you know, some developers are like, well, I want access to the environment. I want Docker containers because I want to do, and I'm not, you know, picking on Docker because I like Docker as well. Everything has its proper use case and scenario. But when you start talking about, well, I want to do this, and I want to be able to control my dependencies and all this, and I want to know that if I put it here, it's going to work this way. It's like, but why? If you're spending time configuring a Docker container, that's time you're not spending coding or solving a problem. So it's kind of like back when the cars, before we started, you know, putting technology in cars, right? It used to be, oh, if you had a car, something went wrong, you could fix it. Well, unless you were me, I couldn't fix anything. I just always took it to the dealership. But if you could fix it, that's what you would do. There's some guys, some people who just love to fix cars. So they would never want to get a car that's technology-based, right? But for me, CF Push is the equivalent of me driving to the BMW dealership, dropping my car off, getting a loaner car, going to work. Getting a phone call, driving back to the dealership, giving a loaner car, getting my car, drive back to the office. That's the experience I want. Why? Because as I said in the beginning, time is of value, right? Because it all comes back to time. At the end of the day, it comes back to time. Our clock is all ticking. So to drive this kind of concept of value and processes and all this stuff home a little bit more, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we try to do with our platform, the SPARROW Activation Platform, okay? And kind of how we connect, how the customer, our company, and our relationship and partnership with Pivotal, how that's all connected, right? So as you see here, this is the SPARROW platform. This is our activation platform. So as a customer, right? As a customer, and we're all customers, so we can appreciate some of this. The things that we value, right, is being made aware of a product, right? That's important because think about it. You don't want to buy something and then only find out that, oh, there was another product that did the same thing that was cheaper, right? You want to be aware of things. And then if you are made aware of a product, you also want to be educated about that product, right? Because you want to be educated so you can make an informed decision as to whether or not product A is better than product B, or whether or not you even need product A. The third thing is once you are aware and you have an understanding of the product, you're like, now I'm ready to buy. How do I, put an order for this product? The selling process, right? How do I place an order for this product? That's important to you. And then after you place that order, the next is about acquiring it. Okay, I put the order in. How do I get it? Are you shipping it to me? Are you mailing it? Do I got to go pick it up? How do I get that product? So that is the space that our activation platform at Comcast, the team that I'm on, the SPARROW platform, that's the space we play in. After you've ordered that product, we basically help you get your internet service. We help you get your voice service. We help you get your video service. That's our role. So what that means is we have an explicit understanding of who our customer is and how we interact with that customer and the value we provide to that customer. You cannot be an engineer today and not have an idea of who your customer is or what value you provide to the customer. How can you possibly create a solution that you don't even know the value that you bring to your customer? Right? So that's important, and that's one of the things that we try and make sure that we do at Comcast is understand who is our customer and what value do we deliver to our customer, not necessarily for the products, because the product guys, they know. They've got the marketing people and all these people doing analysis and everything and market segmentation and all these other sophisticated processes to determine who our customers are and what they value. But if you've got an application system that's kind of back office, back in the organization, how do you make your connection to the customer? Right? And that's important. Because the next thing is, if they go through this acquisition and everything, and they're using the product now, something goes wrong, they've got to call support. And that's not a good thing most of the time, right? Because all of a sudden, if you're spending money on support, that's cutting into your margins, right? It's cutting into your margins. So when we design our solution, we have to think about what are going to be all the support situations that we might create that we have to kind of code for and design for. How do we architect for failure? Right? Because if we don't architect for failure, there's a call that's coming into us, an 800 number that costs us $8. And that's just to start the conversation. Right? So when you talk about architecting for failure, well, what does it mean? Because you hear that term, right? Oh, you should design for failure. You should architect for failure. Well, why? Why do I care? This is why you care. Because it has a direct impact to your organization's profits. So you can build the best solution you want, but if you've got a call rate of 30%, you probably have cut out all the profit. You're just kind of wasting time. So support and understanding what we don't want to do is important in our strategy for helping us in terms of how we architect our solution. So that we try and figure out how do we prevent calls. Give an example, we have a screen that pops up under certain air conditions and tells you, call into the call center. Okay, well, if I'm trying to reduce call center costs, I probably shouldn't be telling them to call into the call center. right? And then, of course, you see, with respects to Comcast, well, what process is driving that acquisition piece? And that's really the fulfillment process. So when you look in an organization, a lot of organizations have a fulfillment process. So this is what we do. We fulfill that order. We provide that service. We activate your service. That's how we fulfill the order that you submitted. So that's the role. So from a customer perspective, we touch them for acquisition. Operationally, within our organization, we support the fulfillment process. So then you come back and you says, when we started looking at Pivotal and Cloud Foundry and Spring, and we said, okay, well, where are we going to use this and how are we going to use it? We were able to then identify and map how we were going to use Pivotal and the Spring framework and tools, how we were going to map them to the needs and the use cases that we have. Partnership. I can't say enough about there should be this kind of shift in partnership, because it used to be in IT, it used to always be just a financial transaction, right? It was kind of like this crackhead on the corner. What you need? What you need? You need an Ethernet card? I got an Ethernet card for you. How much you want? You got $500? Yeah. You need a concentrator? You need a backup server? I mean, that used to be the whole IT industry. Nothing but financial transactions. You didn't know if it was going to work, and that was the end of it. And the dealer, after he sold you whatever it was, he left. After the sales guy sold you whatever it was, he left. That used to be the way it was. But today, what we try to do is understand the value that technology partners have, that they can bring to the table. Pivotal is more important to us than a financial transaction. And that's because we can say, well, we're focused on agility, we're focused on elasticity, we're focused on velocity, resiliency, customer experience, experimentation, designing concepts and prototype and reducing technical debt. But Pivotal's focused on those things, and they have ideas around those things, and those are things that they do all the time. So why not leverage that knowledge? So what's important to us is the value of the partnership. We've been holding technical workshops, so to give you guys an idea of some things you should be doing that we did that was very successful, is that we started having technical workshops with our development teams every month. Whether it be a webinar with Pivotal or an on-site visit. I mean, we've had Josh Long, Matt Stein, Mark Alston, Gavin, Dan, Ben. We've had, I probably named half the employees at Pivotal. We've had them working with Comcast. My main man, Adam here. Adam has basically lived at Comcast, and that means that I've got direct access to Adam. If I say, Adam, dude, man, I was just meeting with our big data team, and we're trying to figure out a framework for doing data ingest for all our application teams now that they're switching over to microservices. So, oh, Spring Cloud Data Flow. Cool. Let's get a workshop going. Let's have a technical session. Talk about it. So those are the types of things that you can do with a partner versus a financial transaction. Elastic knowledge, right? You always hear about, if you've taken business courses and economics, you always hear about elasticity, right? And we try to gain elasticity with people by, outsourcing or cold sourcing or, bringing in other people. But there's a concept of knowledge elasticity. And that's what we value at Comcast. We value knowledge elasticity. So that's why we try to really partner and leverage our relationship, with Pivotal. And the main guy who's driving this for us is Andrew Forbes. Now, he's a sales guy. I don't usually put a lot of, thing in the sales guy. One time he used a technical word, I think it was like cloud, and we were really shocked, We were waiting to see if he was going to break out in hives or something, But no, Andrew is the man. He's been phenomenal, and I don't think we could be as successful as we have been if it wasn't for our relationship with Forbes. So I'm hoping I'm going to get like $10 or something for saying nice things about him later. But no, so that's. I really have more, but I have a 30-minute presentation, so I'm going to just stop here and take any questions. I'm done. Yes, sir.
So you're using Cloud Foundry for everything. I saw at the beginning when you had database as a service with NoSQL.
Yeah.
Did you guys build like a custom service broker or?
Yeah, so from a production perspective, some of the NoSQL databases that were in Cloud Foundry Marketplace weren't really, enterprise ready. So we basically built them in our Steel Cloud environment and then just used user-provided services to basically bind to them. Yes, sir.
How do you manage your business processes? What kind of tools do you use and how do you enforce them in your organization?
So glad you brought that up. So part of my experience and everything has been in process improvement, and I was on the board of the International Association for Business Process Management. And so Case-wise, Corporate Modeler is a tool that I'm familiar with most in terms of managing business processes and so forth. At Comcast, primarily what we use is just using regular Visio and mapping out the processes and things. And then a lot of times when we're trying to do justifications, we'll look at using like activity-based costing so that we can go through the process and be able to understand what's the cost of this process. So to go from point A to point B, what's the cost and what activities cost the most? So that's been a big thing for us, specifically around our QA environment, is looking at how we lean out our QA cycle. Now, we've been able to do tremendous improvements from our QA perspective, but the downside is that the QA groups still kind of work in the same way, so we're trying to work on changing them. So they have this thing they call a test plan. So it might take them 3 days to create the test plan, but we're ready to deploy on the first day. So it's kind of like, it's not going to work anymore the way they're doing things. Okay. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Just from Comcast point of view, what are your thoughts on, so you spoke about innovation, right, which is often you do experiments.
Yes.
To innovate, and it could often result in failures.
Yes.
And you have business requirements to be met.
Yeah.
So how, the whole environment that you have, how in this process, yet meet business requirements, but do experiments, innovate, and not miss the timelines because you keep saying the clock is ticking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we balance that in a lot of ways. So to give you an example, when we started in January 2015 to build the SPARROW Activation Platform, again, we built it ground up, completely cloud native. I was given like 5 junior Java developers who knew nothing about the activation platform, nothing about Cloud Foundry, nothing about cloud. They were just good, solid, junior Java developers. We built the activation platform in parallel to while the existing teams maintained and enhanced the existing system for current business needs. So then, after we finished that, we then had to kind of reverse engineer the process to integrate them together. So then we had to basically look at our monolith system, and we had to figure out how much we could decompose so that we can manage our risk initially, and then what was the point by which we had to kind of just flash cut, because we couldn't decompose anymore without having to put in weird connectivity routing and so forth. So that's kind of what we did. So we built the whole cloud platform. We had to take the code base, right? And so one of the challenges we had when we were dealing with the code was we were trying to figure out, okay, it's like a patient from one hospital to another, and he says, oh, well, this hospital doesn't have what they need. We got to get them to the other hospital, but they're in surgery. So the question is do you do the surgery in flight as you're moving them to the next hospital, or do you move the patient to the next hospital and then restart the surgery? We were having that same discussion around the existing code. Do we change the code? Because it was also technical debt. It was like just massive amount of just, uncommented code and just if-else conditions that just ran like for miles, It was just crazy. So we were trying to say, well, do we change it now, or do we lift it, bring it over, put it in the Spring Boot framework, make sure it can run, and then start refactoring? So we had to think about those approaches and do that. At the same time, we had to maintain updates to the code base because the existing team on the current production team were still putting new features in. So we both had 2 different rally agile story streams of making sure that, okay, if there was a story for them for something, that story, then we had to have that same story and so forth. So we were very careful in terms of managing and monitoring those versions. And so then the QA team also had to have test cases where they were keeping track of, okay, that feature went over there. Have you got that test case for that particular release? You do? Okay, we'll bring that test over there over in our environment as well. So that was kind of how we approached that. Yeah, and sorry guys, I could have went on and really more. I was going to go more architecturally and deeper on this. My talk is actually 60 minutes, but I was given 30, so. But sorry, but hopefully I've been able to share a little bit of something that somebody could learn and benefit. So thanks everyone.